Hello everybody, welcome to More Change as Needed, where, because I love horror, thrillers and suspense, I am going to talk, rant, rave about, review and recommend movies, TV series and books in those genres for you as I draw. And we're finally at the movie that I have been wanting to talk about from the moment I started this series of videos. A complete classic which managed to rewrite everything that everyone thought about zombies and the living dead, without actually using any of those words except for the title, and became such a cultural behemoth that now it's the original Buddha zombies, the ones that are seen as the exception in horror, rather than the rule as they used to be. Done with a shoestring budget, and not much more than guts and gumption, George Romero could not have expected back then that he'd make one of the most influential horror movies of all time. But here we are, when his type of undead are the most common and have spawned thousands upon thousands of variation. All of them harking back to this very first Night of the Living Dead, back in 1968. If the bluff was created out of spite, and became a classic by accident, Night of the Living Dead is a work made out of love, and elevated to a classic out of the same love. Which I know it's a funny thing to say about a movie that it's not only about flesh-eating wolves, yes Serengeti, I'm getting there, but also has spawned some of the darkest takes on humanity thanks to the thousands of different stories that it inspired. But it is the truth. Every single frame of Night of the Living Dead, every single crew member, even the cast with one shining exception, came from the same little town where it was mostly filmed and made, not just because they wanted to show off to distributors or make movie history, but because they were a group of friends who loved movies, loved horror, and wanted to see if they could make a movie. Yes, this is a story about, and I quote, not the poster for The Night of the Living Dead, but one from The Dawn of the Living Dead, "When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth." But it's also about how trying to survive can end up being the reason why you make the wrong choices, and how sometimes, no matter how much you want for the heroes to pull through, the world is not going to let it happen. Yes, it's a very dark movie. But behind the scenes is a story about how 10 friends from Pennsylvania asked each other, why don't we make a movie? And without having any idea of what the work meant, how difficult it was to make a movie, they made one. Now, this is not to say that John Russo, Russell Strainer, Carl Harman and Marilyn Eastman and the others had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They had been working since 1960 making commercials and short films. Now, this is not to say that George Romero, John Russo, Russell Strainer, Carl Harman and Marilyn Eastman, as well as the others, had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They had gone to college, they had been working since 1960 making commercials and short films, and together they had formed Image 10 Productions to keep doing that. It was just that they also loved movies and wanted to do something on their own. Something big that was not just to sell something else to the audience. They even say that in the commentary of the Criterion edition, the 40th anniversary special, and the documentary Birth of the Living Dead, that because they didn't have a perfect idea of what it meant to make a whole movie, basically everything was done by everyone. Whoever had their hands free at the time did whatever was needed at the moment. Not only that, they had a budget of less than zero. I kid. It was between $114,000 and $125,000, which, let's be honest, could be bottle caps and pocket lint compared to what a small budget movie costs nowadays, even if it is made for YouTube. And an absolute lack of a script at first. And yet, they prevailed. Here I have to put a little parenthesis to say that no, I am not saying that people should just grab a camera, get as much money as they can get in Kickstarter and start making a movie with no idea of what they are doing. Again, Image 10 Productions knew how to film a commercial, they knew how to make short films. It was just the expansion of what they were doing. What I am saying is that they took what little they had and used it the best they could. Going back to that, with more than a little influence from I Am Legend, the novel by Richard Matheson, and from two different ideas by George Romero and Joe Russo, and we will talk about those two different ideas later, Night of the Living Dead was born and changed the world of horror as we know it. But because I know that there are a few people in the room who haven't watched Night of the Living Dead, the original black and white version, yet, well, yes, baby, I am getting there. The trouble with tribbles is that they never shut up. Tribbles and cats. Here is a quick summary of the events. Johnny and Barbara are two siblings who travel to the cemetery in Pittsburgh in order to put flowers in their father's grave. As they are there, arguing about why they do it, Johnny starts teasing Barbara about the dead coming back to chase her, when a man comes in and attacks them, killing Johnny. Barbara manages to escape, but crashes the car, so she has to run to an airy farmhouse that is empty, except for the half-eaten corpse of the owner. Yeah, that's a bad sign. As she's starting to get hysterical, with good reason, and the farm begins to be surrounded by more ghosts, another survivor arrives. Ben, who, after realizing that both he and Barbara are alone, starts barricading the place in order to survive, while Barbara falls into a catatonic shock state. As the night advances, more and more ghosts start arriving to the house. The Night of the Living Dead has begun. You will probably notice that, even when everyone considers The Night of the Living Dead the movie that made zombies into which they are now, and even I said that at the beginning, when I was summarizing the plot, I never once used the word zombie to describe the monsters in Night of the Living Dead. That is because not only the word itself is not used in the movie, as back then zombie was still a human in a death-like state that was controlled by a voodoo priest, and nothing more for horror movies, but also because even years later, when talking about the movie, none of the cast and crew call them zombies unless they are talking about the monsters that were inspired by Night of the Living Dead much later. When talking about the movie, they call them either the Living Dead or ghouls. This, of course, came to the root of another fun quirk of most modern zombie movies, TV series, and books. We never call them zombies, with some special exceptions, and instead we try to find every single possible nickname there is to describe what is basically a cannibalistic corpse walking. My favorite version of this is, of course, Shaun of the Dead, where they decide that calling them zombies sounds stupid. This is basically because, of course, future movies would try and make these ghosts more complicated than they were originally. The reason why they are not zombies in Night of the Living Dead is because when Romero and Russo wrote their scripts, they had no idea what their monsters were. Image 10 had decided they wanted to make a horror movie because they were seen as relatively cheap and easy to make, as well as getting quick returns in the box office, because back then, horror movies were seen as entertainment for children. Movies were unrated, and thus horror movies went to be seen mostly in matinees for a bunch of laughing kids who were waiting to see the latest rubber monster on the screen. Night of the Living Dead came to change that, and it was one of the reasons why horror movies are no longer considered for kids. I just can't imagine how a child, a 10-year-old child, a 7-year-old child must have felt when they watched that. The Blob, it was not. They also decided to shoot the movie in black and white, not because it was more artistic, not because it gave an idea of what bleakness was in the story. No. They decided to do that because it would be cheaper, and they were trying to save money. So Russo had a beige idea about alien invaders who came to Earth in order to eat humans, which is as original as Boy Meets Girl, They Fall in Love, but nothing really set on stone. However, George Romero, who is the real father of the zombie genre as far as I am concerned, after a short holiday in Canada with his family, came back with a script for what would become the first hour of Night of the Living Dead. From the graveyard scene to when Ben and Barbara barricade the house, pretty much ready to be shot, with a lot of influences from I Am Legend, as I mentioned, and just one tiny little problem. while the script made it clear that the monsters were reanimated corpses. There was no reasoning for why the ghouls attacked people, or why the dead had just started to walk and attack people in the first place. This will also become a staple to the genre. Well, there are a few radio announcements that give some sort of theories of what happened, the most common one being a comet passing near Earth. We never get a real explanation of why the dead walked, and for a long time, that was a golden rule for zombie movies. We don't care why the dead are walking, we care that the dead are walking, and more importantly, we care that the dead are eating living people. That is the important thing, not why. Survival comes before an explanation. The Return of the Living Dead, which we will talk about when we get to the 80s, added this radioactive group to the mythos. I'm not sure, but I think they are the first actual science-created zombies. But Night of the Living Dead, and in fact, all of the Living Dead series by Romero, never tells you why the zombies exist. But anyway, Russo liked the script that George had much better than his own alien attacking people one. Russo then suggested that they took part of his idea, the fact that the aliens were eating people, and made the ghouls cannibal. As I said, this is another idea that he fleshed more out in his own Return of the Living Dead, where the zombies don't just eat people, they specifically eat brains. And this is very important. In Night of the Living Dead, in this original seminal zombie movie, the zombies don't care what part of the body they are eating. They just care that they are eating. Anyway, Romero agreed that cannibal walking corpses was a little bit more scary than just walking corpses. And, well, as you can imagine, the rest is Undead History. Now, if you talk to anyone modern about the impact that Night of the Living Dead had in zombie movies, one of the subjects that are going to come up to discussion is going to be the fact that zombies are a critical commentary on society, because how it cannot be when the movie ends with a black man being gunned down by white people for no good reason in 1968. The problem is that the only moment in which Romero and Russo thought or realized the implications of that was when they were going to present the movie for distribution once it was finished and even developed into film, because on the way to their first distributor they were listening to the radio and heard the news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been just murdered by a sniper shot to the head. That is to say, they had worked for a year in a story that would later be considered highly racialized, a huge commentary on racial relationships, with one of the very few non-black exploitation black main characters that was not whitewashed in personality to make the audience feel more comfortable, and they never once thought that it could be interpreted as a socially charged message. That is in part because when they were writing the story, Ben was not written as a black man. In fact, he was written as a loudmouth, rude white trucker with little to no education, a redneck, in short. However, as they were casting people, and once again, most if not all of the cast were friends of the group or very local actors who knew the cast and crew, and for some, like Kate Wayne, who played Tom, the only role they would ever play in their lives, until it came to casting Ben. And between an amazing audition and a suggestion by one of Romero's friends, they decided on Dwayne Jones, who just happened to be on town to visit some friends and was a professional actor. Now, the moment they decided to cast Dwayne, they also decided not to rewrite Ben. Before Ben, there hadn't been any male black actors playing a leading role that wasn't subservient or somehow calmer to keep the white audiences happy. Think of the one exception to lead actors in the era, Sidney Poitier. And none in horror. There is a reason why we have the trope of Black Man Dies First. So Romero and Russo decided to leave the script as it was because, well, they were being progressive. Russo's words, Romero's words, in the Criterion Collection commentary, not mine. Dwayne Jones did not agree with that. While no one ever says that he got too aggressive about it, in fact, although unfortunately there are no commentaries or interviews with Dwayne Jones about Night of the Living Dead that I could find, everyone in the cast and crew commentaries talk about Dwayne with love and how they missed him a lot. So Dwayne convinced them to make Ben more soft-spoken and educated, but never let him be stomped over by the angry white Harry Cooper, and thus created one of the most memorable and beloved main characters in horror films. A character that we all cry when he is shot at the end. The fact that Ben dies because of a mistake made the movie and his role even more memorable. According to George Romero, many distributors said that they would only distribute the film if they changed the ending so that at the very least Ben survived. Ben, which again in 1968 was an incredible thing that distributors were saying, well, yes, but let the black man live. But Romero and Russo stuck to their guns. The whole point of the movie was that if you made a mistake in that situation, well, not in that specific situation, let's not go into zombie survival mode, but in a situation of life and death, you will die. And changing the ending would have made everything pointless. And he was right, as absolutely no one was ready for that moment, and while the premiere had a lot of teens and children in the audience, as I said, horror was seen as their genre. By the time the movie ended, according to people who were there, everyone was silent and quite horrified. Now, you can see a ton of versions of Night of the Living Dead nowadays. It's even here, in YouTube, for free. I could even put it in my channel if I wanted. Not that I will, because I do respect George Romero's wishes. This is because a horrible mistake made when the movie was changed from its original title, Night of the Flesh Eaters, to Night of the Living Dead. Because see, Night of the Flesh Eaters had a copyright notice on it, and at the time, said notification was needed in order to maintain a copyright. You had to put the little circle with a Z. But when the name was changed, someone who George Romero doesn't know, but I am pretty sure he cursed their name forever and ever, forgot to add that tiny circle C under Night of the Living Dead, and because of that it was released into the public domain the moment it hit the theaters. George Romero always said he'd get Night of the Living Dead back, but unfortunately, as of 2024, it's still in the public domain, 7 years after his passing. There is a lot to say about Night of the Living Dead. It's one of the most influential horror movies of the modern era, and the one that launched not only the Of the Dead franchise, but also Return of the Living Dead, the whole franchise, inspired Resident Evil, which in turn inspired 100 video games and every single zombie-related work where zombies are ghouls rather than, actual blood zombies. Yes, that means that we can track the origins of zombies and cheerleaders all the way down to Night of the Living Dead, believe it or not. Because of that, there's a lot that has been said about the movie, some of which I have summarized a bit, but I honestly urge you to, at the very least, watch the original movie as soon as you can. As I meant, you can watch it everywhere, because despite of George Romero's wishes, it's still in the public domain. Bite into this amazing piece of horror history, and if you can, listen to the commentaries of the Criterion Collection, which are the source of most of my information here. There is also this amazing documentary called Birth of the Living Dead, which managed to interview pretty much most of the cast, except again for Dwayne Jones. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there for this movie, which is a masterclass on movie making. I want to thank my dear patrons Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, Jessica, and Nelly Riley, as well as my first supporter Tania Pineda and the most amazing Amy Sung, without whom none of my videos would be possible. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Annalisa with a link in the description, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as to get access to a ton of art before anyone else and get the chance to suggest future subjects for videos. You can also support me through Ko-fi, and for each coffee, you will get mentioned in 3 future videos. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, and of course, you sharing the links. I also love all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. This was Annalisa Zárate, and remember, there is not a problem in the horror genre that cannot be solved with more chasers and a cup of good coffee.